Get Real with Kacey Kasem is back for another episode, and this one features Madi Kroll. Madi is a podcaster and content analyst that you've probably seen all over the place. We chatted about all kinds of things, such as growing up in Oklahoma, the Women in Fantasy Football panel at the Fantasy Football Expo, putting out content for the first time, naps, being authentic, and much more. Make sure you're following Madi on Twitter at Madi Kroll, as well as me at Kacey Kasem. The podcast is on Twitter at GetReal_pod. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. I wanted to give a shout out to everyone who has been listening, spreading the word, and just being so supportive of the podcast. It makes me so happy to be able to put these podcast interviews out for you, and I hope you're getting knowledge from it like I am. And now, my conversation with Madi Kroll. We are excited because, I say we are because everybody that's listening, I'm sure, is excited as well. But Madi, we're going to learn all kinds of stuff about you. I'm sure we will. But
that's scary.
But, yes, it could be scary. It might be wonderful and the most exciting thing that's happened to us in a long time. So
guaranteed to be entertaining for sure.
For sure. So stick around because spoiler alert, there's a lot of cool stuff coming up, even though I really don't know what's about to come up.
Listen, sometimes I'm funny, so it's bound to make you laugh at some point.
There you go. I appreciate having that because it just me and it's not going to be as funny, but we need that. We need that little added boost. So let's go back. Let's talk about a funny time. At least it was a funny time for me, but let's go back and talk about childhood. When you were growing up, where did you grow? Yeah, I'm your therapist.
Just dive me straight into the trauma.
Excuse me. Let me get my pen and my paper out. Because I always want to kind of get a feel for how you kind of got on this journey towards sports and fantasy sports. But looking at your childhood, let's just say, where did you grow up and was sports an important part of that process?
So I love questions like these because, well, one, it's so fun getting to talk about yourself. But on the other hand, I like to actually be able to reflect on like where I came from and things like that. But I grew up in Hicktown, Oklahoma, literally like you will see people riding their horses through the subway drive-through because that's just like what happens. There was 2 stoplights, I think, when I was growing up there. Anyway, super small town. There wasn't a whole lot to do. And sports is everything there. So from the time that you're little, you get started in gymnastics or soccer, and then it's onto t-ball, and then they have basketball, all of the things. I come from a huge basketball family. So my dad played pro ball. My mom played collegiate ball. I was bred to be a basketball player. I say that all the time. My mom's 5'11", my dad's 6'10", and then I came out. I was in Little Dribblers when I was 4. So I have been in sports since then. And I think because basketball was kind of like shoved down my throat my entire childhood, once I got to where I could make the decision, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And my mom was like, well, you have to do something. You can't just go to high school. That's not what we do here. So my stepdad he was the defensive coordinator for the high school football team. So I jumped in. I got to be a trainer, and I've loved football since I was little. I tried to play Little League when I was younger. I fell in love during the Aikman era, the Cowboys. I was like 3 or 4, and I just loved football. And hey, she's repping some Aikman stuff back there. I didn't even see it.
It's off to the side, but we love Aikman in this house.
Some people do. I think I prefer quarterback over commentator, but that's a whole other topic.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, we won't go there.
we won't dive into that. This will turn into like a 5-series episode or a 5-series podcast. Anyways, so I lost my train of thought there. I love football. I got to kind of get more involved with it from the aspect of learning to break down film and all of that good stuff when I was in high school. And then when I went to college, I ended up living with part of the football team and kind of grew my knowledge base there, I would say. But that's kind of how things got started.
And you brought up college and you're wearing an OU hat. So I take it is that
Boomer Sooner, baby.
There we go.
Of course.
Checking in, I'm from the Dallas area, so I know all too well about the rivalry between UT and OU.
For sure.
Red
Horns
River.
down.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I have no dog in the fight. I am not a college football watcher or lover or any of the things, but more power to all of you guys.
And just don't say that out loud in public in Texas.
I know.
People have been incarcerated for work or less.
Yeah, it's hard to keep it under wraps, but I act like I know enough about the NFL that it kind of makes up for everything else.
Hey, that's totally fine.
Totally fine. I totally keep track of everything football, even middle school football, even
okay, but whenever you dive into the NFL as deeply as we do all the time, NCAA is a whole other job.
Yeah. That's why I'm lazy. I can't do it.
It's so stressful. I can keep up with one team and that's about it.
Yeah, that's what I always said is if I can find one team, maybe. But like for Dynasty and stuff, like, do you play Dynasty?
So I just joined a Dynasty team. So, or I guess league. So this is my first year of exploring that.
Gotcha. Okay. So watching, college games and everything, I guess knowing about those college players is a big deal when it comes to Dynasty. So do you find having that knowledge has been helpful for diving into it?
Yeah. So I found a cheat code. What I do is I follow the Reese's Senior Bowl advisors, I think is what they call them, the little scouts. I follow them and I pick up the highlights. So I'm not having to watch every single game constantly. I listen to them. And then I love Greg Cosell because Greg Cosell has really great points. And I also feel like he's got that kind of Madden vibe in the sense of every time I listen to him, I learn something new. So I just kind of cheat my way through the NCAA thing to benefit my NFL knowledge now.
Well, that's great. Like the little tricks and tips, hacks to get through it. That's awesome.
Oh, for sure. We love a shortcut.
So, anything that can make life easier. Perfect. So, okay. In college and football being a part of your life, when did fantasy football become a part of your life?
To be honest, I'm still new to the fantasy football world. I played when I was younger, and then I played some throughout college, but I never took it seriously. So I've always kind of had leagues, but not to the point where I'm like throwing things like I am now if something goes wrong and I'm like all stressed out.
Right.
So I would say about a year ago is really when I seriously dove into having way too many teams and made my life revolve around fantasy football. But I love it. So I had an algebra teacher, shout out Miss Callahan, in 8th grade. She gave bonus points if you kept up with a fantasy football team because there's math involved, obviously. And so that's where I kind of got started. And I do have a home league that actually started whenever I was a sophomore in high school that I've continued, and we meet up every year. But outside of that, I never really took it serious until about a year ago.
Okay, well, I like that you brought up the math part because I was talking to Dave Kluge last episode, and he brought up the same thing about math being like one of the things that got his math teacher also implemented.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so it was like they kind of did like box scores, or they did like looked up different things and all that. But they didn't call it fantasy football, but it was basically the same kind of idea. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I've heard it on this podcast a few times where math has been kind of the stepping stone,
which is crazy because that's the first time I've ever gotten 100% in a math course, and it was only because I had so many bonus points from doing fantasy football every week. It was awesome, and everybody participated.
That is, I could see kids being real interested in math all of a sudden because
yeah, it was awesome.
It's addictive too. So you're teaching, no, but it's so much fun, and so that is cool. Like we didn't have that when I was, in high school, and that would have been, well, I guess they did have it. They didn't tell me about it. How about that?
You weren't invited to that class.
Nobody told me about fantasy football when I was.
But it was also a whole different ball game because back in my day, when I was in the 8th grade, there was no like fantasy apps or anything like that. Like iPhones were still pretty new. So you really we looked up stats and newspapers she had, and then of course we could use the computer. But it wasn't as accessible now. So it was kind of fun to have a designated time every day to be able to go in and check out fantasy stuff for school. It was awesome.
Oh man. Yeah, for sure. And that, it's so cool. I worked at a school for about 10 years or so.
No way.
Like an after school program. I was in charge of one of the elementary schools after school programs. And
that's dope.
Thank you. No, I really enjoyed it. I
probably
really
took
did.
10 years off your life.
I did. That's why I stopped. But, it was great. And, I keep in contact with some of the teachers that still work at that school. And so one teacher's like, oh, wow, you like write fantasy football content that, you put out stuff. Like my kids would love it if you came in and like talked now. Then, the pandemic happened and
yeah. And
all
then
that stuff, but I haven't been
nobody was
able,
allowed in there.
but yeah, exactly. But it's just cool because she's like, they would be so interested in that. So when you were growing up, what did you want to do with your life when you got older? What did you want to be?
When I was really younger, I loved Erin Andrews. I wanted to be Erin Andrews so bad. I think I was her for Halloween like multiple years in a row.
Awesome.
And then as I got older, things kind of shifted. I actually got to travel a lot when I was younger, so I modeled internationally. So I thought that that's what I wanted to do, is just go live that life. And then I lived that life for a few years and was like, okay, I'm ready to come home. And then I thought that I wanted to be a dentist. So went to college, got all my classes, started working in a dental office. And I kind of stepped away from the sports world kind of altogether. I say that in a sense of like, I kind of hid a lot of my football knowledge for a long time. I was in a relationship that kind of was put down. And so until I kind of went to therapy and worked through all that, I kind of just shut that side of myself off for a little bit. And then pandemic hit. I was doing therapy really hard, and she was like, just get back to something that you loved when you were a kid. And that ended up being football. And then all of a sudden, all of these doors started opening for me. And I just realized I am much happier in this space where I get to talk about sports. It doesn't seem like a job when I'm getting to do something that I enjoy. So I would say childhood dreams was probably to do what I'm doing now. But that kind of got skewed and a little muddy along the way.
It happens, it happens to all of us. So it's fun to see everybody's progression. And, with the pandemic, a lot of people kind of dove headfirst into putting out content and starting up, sites or podcast or whatever. How did you come across being able to put out content on fantasy sports?
I love this question because it was so accidental. So I am a part of Junior League. Junior League is a women's volunteer organization. It's international, but the Tulsa chapter, I met a girl and we instantly hit it off talking about football. And all season long, we were watching games together. I just kind of felt like, oh, wow, like I found somebody who is so relatable to me, who likes the same things that I can just be genuine with. This is awesome. We wanted to connect with other people like that. So we decided to start this podcast. We had no idea what we were doing. So we start this podcast, and then all of a sudden one day, we had been doing it for maybe like 3 weeks at this time. I got a DM on Instagram from it was the fantasy coaches, and they said that they were doing a big charity podathon and asked if we could come on. And Cassie, the girl I was doing the podcast with, was busy that night, but I was like, sure, I'll hop on. So I hopped on, and that segment I was paired with Rum Boys Robbie, and I just kind of hit it off with both of them. It was awesome. And then Robbie invited me to come on his podcast, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. Anytime anybody asked me to like come on the podcast or do anything with them, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then Robbie was like, okay, you got to get a Twitter. Everybody has a Twitter. That's the only way people are going to know who you are.
You didn't even have a Twitter.
I didn't have a Twitter up until August 31st of last year. I got my Twitter. So I've had it for just over a year. But so I made a Twitter, and then I saw all the good stuff that everybody was doing. And I was like, I want to be a part of this. These are my people.
That is, it's funny to me that people, when they come on here, they're like, well, I just joined Twitter like in the last couple of years. And I'm like, I've been on Twitter since 2008. So I've seen
some of us are slower to the game.
No, some of us are older than others. So look, I knew where all the content was before everybody. I should have been like,
You are
I really wish that you
mother.
guys didn't all come in and take all my secrets from me. But I guess at the same time, I've got a lot more people to choose from, I guess, to get my content. How do
Yeah.
you,
You paved the way for us
yeah, that's
also.
it. Well, well, my question is with like the new wave of everybody that came in, got Twitters that, find out that like Twitter is the way to go. What kind of social media were you also using for your fantasy experience, if you will?
So my fantasy experience was so limited. It was literally an Instagram that had, I think, 600 followers. Like that
Okay.
was it. So it was very limited. So you can imagine like the culture shock that I received once I joined Twitter. I was like, holy cow, there's thousands of people that like
Yeah.
fantasy football and talk about it. And then I would say this past year, I was like, okay, like my eyes were opened. But until I went to that big networking event, the Fantasy Football Expo, I remember, like, I looked at Sam and I was like, "Holy cow, like, this is real." And I just felt so, like, welcomed, and getting to meet people that you kind of, like, admired online for a year was so cool, but to be in a space where y everybody has, like, the same interests, you just kind of feel accepted. That's the
Right.
best way I can explain it, and that was such a cool feeling. But as far as, like, what did I think about coming in? It was kind of like a shell shock.
How did you figure out like how to use Twitter and who to follow and what you needed to be
Oh,
looking
I
for and
still don't know
tweeting?
if I do this correctly, because I just tweet whatever comes to my head, and then sometimes people are like, "Maddie," and then sometimes I get those texts it's like, Was that for real? You should probably take that down." Like, I just kinda tweet whatever comes to my head. I follow people who I think are funny, or who have good information, and I kinda just I base my Twitter off of vibes, which is a
Right.
terrible
Okay.
answer,
No.
but it's really just about, like, what makes me happy whenever it comes across my timeline.
No, and I totally enjoy that, and I appreciate that. There's a crowd of people, and you know what? And they're allowed to be this way. Everybody's allowed to be, whatever, even if it's the stick to
You
football
can be a
crowd.
hateful
Well, I just
hater.
want to say the stick to football crowd. I'm not the biggest
Oh,
fan
those
of,
ones.
obviously,
Yeah.
because if they're stick to football, they're probably not listening to this podcast because it's not,
It's not
whatever.
always
But
football.
it's not always football. So, how do you feel about that? Do you care? Does it matter?
I don't really care. I think that everybody has their own outlook and their own goals, and I'm totally for whatever works for you. You should do that and stick to it if that's what makes you happy. I just think that people should be authentic. And for me, I kind of think there's a ton of people even just like on TV that are so accessible that are saying the exact same things that we're saying.
Mhm.
So I just want my personality to shine. Like if you're following me or if you're listening to what I'm doing, it's because you like me as a person. And so for me, I just want to be relatable and I just want to be authentic so that I draw people who connect with me. And then we also talk about football. And that's just kind of like the way I view it. But I also know that there are people who are very strictly, I'm going to focus on this, and it works out great for them. So I think that people should just try to see what works best for them, what content they enjoy, and roll with it.
And when you first started putting out the podcast with Cassie,
Mhm.
had you ever done anything like that before, or was this kind of your first jump into doing something like that?
Absolutely not. I knew nothing. We didn't have headphones. We had these little mics that we bought from Best Buy. Maybe even Amazon, I don't know. We just kind of I Googled how to start a podcast, and that's how it happened. It was very mediocre. We recorded in GarageBand, and I just export it. But no, I had no idea what I was doing. I will say I learned a lot going on other people's podcasts. So once Robbie invited me on his, and then I started going to other different podcasts and shows, then I started asking more questions, taking notes, and figuring out what I was supposed to be doing.
Is there something you can think of that you thought was going to be more difficult about putting out content or podcasting that really didn't end up being as difficult as, it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be?
I really thought that it was a lot scarier than what it is. I think for a while I was nervous to put out my own stuff or my own thoughts, or I would really over research things and have almost arguments inside my head about like, if somebody challenges me on this, what am I going to say before I would put something out? And so I kind of thought that it would be like that, but it's really not. I've learned that it's more of an accepting community than what I assumed. And I've learned that it doesn't really matter what other people think. And so that whole aspect of just being able to be confident and be myself, I thought was going to be really difficult. And it was a lot easier than I thought it was. Thankfully.
Thankfully, right? Thankfully. Shoo.
I feel like I should knock on some wood too. Like,
yeah, right.
Don't change.
Yeah, right. No, once you find the groove, though, you're good. So, was there anything that somebody had told you when you started out that you took and went with that was like a piece of advice or something that really,
that really helped me? There was so much, but one thing that I remember was one of my friends, Herms. He was actually on the show, I think. He told me, he was like, just be yourself. You know your stuff. You don't have to prove it to anybody. Just relax and be yourself, and it'll happen. And so I think that was the greatest advice that I received, because I feel so much more comfortable whenever I can just be me and I don't have to filter myself, because that's when I start getting into the stammering and don't know what to say, is whenever I'm trying to keep those filters up. So I loved that somebody told me, like, gave me permission almost, like, hey, be yourself, be creative, do you, and it'll be okay.
And going on podcasts with other people, sometimes you're on podcasts with people you barely know and you're trying to learn.
That's so hard.
Yeah, I
was going to
ask
don't even
you,
realize that.
How is it going into a podcast, especially when you don't know the people that you're going on to a podcast with?
To be honest with you, I think I still struggle with that. I think so. I'm a person where I match energy. I am honestly just crazy off the wall all the time. But if I get with somebody who is really relaxed and chill, I kind of sync to that. Or if somebody's crazy off the rails, that's the way I'm going to act. And so it's hard when you don't know somebody. Like for me, I don't know what I'm walking into. I kind of find that difficult. It's almost intimidating at first. But I think that I think that's something that it gets easier the more you do. At least it has for me.
So exactly. I think the practice makes perfect kind of thing. Going on these different podcasts and getting to experience different situations and different formats and how people do shows different ways. Has that helped you become more comfortable if you were to podcast with, either it just being by yourself or like you and one other person?
100%. I think that anytime you get in front of a camera, it gets easier and easier. I think that it's still difficult to like listen to yourself back, like listen back to what you said. I think that if I would go back and listen, I might find that it's a little less intimidating. But yeah, I just think that the more times you do it, you're right. Like practice makes perfect. I'm still not perfect though, so.
Well, I don't know if anybody is, except for
I really don't know anybody who's perfect, but it does get easier. And I think that I think you're right. Like the more times you're on, you kind of pick up tips and tricks, or you see how they do things and you might adopt that. So yeah, I definitely think that you get inspiration from any show that you're on, or at least I do. I also, like, I'm an avid podcast listener, so I think that helps a lot too, is just being able to hear how other people answer questions and then how other people ask questions and that sort of thing. I think that helps a lot too. Just kind of being submersed in it.
Being an avid listener of podcasts, are you a listener of fantasy content, of other what kind of content do you like to listen to?
So I'm kind of all across the board. I listen to, of course, like the fantasy stuff. I listen to NFL podcasts. I love Ross Tucker's podcast just because it's like a quick one, and I feel like I get my NFL feeds. But I love pop culture podcasts. I'm like obsessed with them because I used to love trash TV, like reality TV. I don't have time for that anymore with football stuff. Right. So having those pop culture podcasts, I can kind of like get my fix on everything that's going on in the world outside of football.
That's awesome.
It really is.
Because who has time, right? Who has time?
And I can listen to a podcast like in the shower or when I'm on a walk or driving. Really, I listen to podcasts all the time.
Right. And yeah, you were talking earlier to me about how like with YouTube, like you don't really you can't look at,
you're like sitting there. And that's so hard for me because I'm ADHD.
It's hard for me too. And well, okay, I'm not ADHD, so the lady says. But where am I going
you're
with
like,
this?
I tried.
I tried. I can't even do that right. Where am I going with this? See, are we anyway,
sitting down and watching anything is hard.
Yeah, I
right?
can't, and at work, I'm not allowed to just like have a scream like there. Anyway,
That's rude.
I like to do my so I'll listen to a podcast, right? Or I'll like make sure that it's turned so that people can't see that I can see,
but you're indulging. You're trying to treat yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you stay sane in the workplace, as you multitask.
100%.
I'm just kidding, employers. I love you. Hey, man, a listen's a listen. No. So anyway, let's get back on track. See, she says she's ADHD, and then I'm getting her off track.
Listen, I will do that to you the entire podcast. I promise.
You know what? And that is the best. Going off the rails is the best. I love that when you're on a podcast and it kind of just starts going off the rails and isn't completely like.
I'm so happy you love that because that's probably what's going to happen the entire time.
I'm good with it. In a podcast situation like this, it's good. In a situation where I would like to be more prepared, it's not always the best, but you know the most about yourself, so it's a topic that I'm pretty
well versed in myself. I've had 29 years. Still working on it, but
29 years. 29. I don't even think I was playing fantasy football when I was 29.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe that's when I started. I don't know. It's probably been around 28, 29 is when I started playing fantasy football, and that was a ways away. Anyway, we'll get back to let's get back on track with the fantasy content. I want to know, what do you do or has this happened to you? I'm sure it has. This happened to a lot of us, where you get kind of like stuck in like a funk or like a creative block. I know with fantasy football and the NFL, there's always a lot of content, but what happens when you're kind of not feeling it?
That happened a lot whenever I felt like I was putting a ton of pressure on myself. I think it's really hard especially for people who are writing articles, it's hard to write something that's going to be eye-catching or different than what everybody else is doing. And so you put all this pressure on yourself to make sure that it's up to par. And I think that sometimes people do that with video content also, or even podcasting. For me, I found whenever I don't put that pressure on myself, it's so much better. So I stopped saying, I want to put out this many videos, or I want to put out this content or whatever. I just kind of go with, I have a notes app on my phone, and whenever something pops in my head, no matter what time of day it is, I'll jot it down as like an idea in my notes app. And then whenever I'm feeling like juiced up, or I'm like ready to go make a video or whatever, I will go back to the notes section and kind of relive those creative moments. So I try to not put pressure on myself to do what I used to do. Is I would say, okay, like Wednesday, I'm going to record 4 videos. That didn't work for me. So now it's when I get inspired or I have that little burst of creativity, I'm taking advantage of it, even if I'm not at a point where I can stop and go record a video or whatever. I just kind of like put it to the side and then revisit it later. And that's really helped for me. I do the same thing with Twitter drafts, with tweets.
See, I do that. I probably have a million drafts that I just forget to go.
You should go through and just fire some off. I would.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be like calling people out for calling me out for stuff. I'll be like, you just tweeted that. I was like, oh, it's supposed to be like 2 years ago. My bad. 2 years
ago. You're gonna be like, don't listen to Maddie anymore. It was terrible advice.
Hey, you got to keep people on their feet. They'll be asking you, what did you mean here? And then you can be like, I don't really know. Let me tell you.
That's usually what happens to me. I'll be like, that thought came to me in the middle of the night. I don't really know. It was funny.
That's like 4 vodka sodas in, but
yeah,
that's usually me.
Also happened.
That's me a lot. They'll be like, why'd you say this? And I'll be like, because I was drinking alcohol. I don't know. I don't know why.
It wasn't me. It was the tequila.
It was. There you go. I'm playing always. Oh,
I love a good rage tweet after tequila. Tequila, Maddie, and Twitter.
Yeah.
Don't mix.
Oh, no?
I even paid for like the Twitter thing where it's like, and make sure it'll say like, do you want to unsend or go ahead and send it through, where it gives you that time where you have to think about it. I thought that would kind of like filter me a little more, but I just like click past it. I'm like, nah, send.
Yeah. I'm thinking, because I'm always like, man, I think back, I'm like, you won't get this. Cause again, we've established I'm old. But I just remember, when I was like in high school and not having we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have.
Thank gosh though.
Well, yes.
High school would be miserable if we lived in the TikTok generation.
We didn't have, exactly. So it's just like, would it not?
It would be awful. Absolutely. High school's hard enough, but to have to deal with TikTok on top of that, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Homeschool me now. I will be a hermit.
See, I don't know where I was going with this, but TikTok kind of threw me off.
Sorry. You said that you guys didn't have social media. Or no, you said cell phones when you were in high school.
So I didn't have the internet at my fingers to give me all the answers and to oh, hold on, let me figure out who that person is in that movie real quick, and then get stuck in a Wikipedia hole or IMDb or whatever, trying to figure, whatever.
Thank goodness we don't live there anymore.
Life, right? So having distractions and all over the place, and then and then doing fantasy content for a living and putting out that, how do you stay on track? I mean, I know as a job you kind of have to, but how do you make sure that your focus is on what it needs to be on, especially with
not the last. I love that you think I've mastered that.
I don't, you're my expert. I had Kelly on and I asked her all these questions because I was really intrigued by it, because my therapist was hardcore thinking, right? And maybe still, I don't know. And then I went and did all the tests, and they're like, oh no, no. I'm like, no, that's not what your anxiety is a ridiculous amount of. But
and those things go hand in hand. So for so long, well, first of all, I was diagnosed when I was younger, and my mom is a teacher, and she was like, no, we're not doing that. She was like, you're fine. Just, you're going to be fine.
Right on.
And then, so I am medicated. That does help. However, I will say that super hinders my creativity. So I don't like to take my medicine. Okay. The issue is ADHD and anxiety go hand in hand, because your neurons are firing, but your receptors aren't receiving, which basically means that ADHD people are in a fight or flight all day long. So our anxiety is just up to here. So I will sometimes do what I call work enhancement drug. So I'll take my ADHD medicine when I have to do admin, because that's where I struggle. If I have to reply to emails or whatever. So I kind of alternate those. But if I'm doing my fantasy football thing, or I'm being creative or doing videos, I won't take my medicine that day. It's just kind of like a free for all. And I love that. But cool. As far as not getting distracted, I don't know what that's like, because I'm distracted all the time. Okay. I took a break to go get I think it was hand soap or something from Target the other day. And then I was going to come right back and do my rankings for the week, my rankings of teams. And that turned into a 5.5 hour process, because I got so distracted between Target, and then I went to Sonic, and then it was around town.
It all sounds very, basically Target. I mean, you get trapped there for at least 3 hours.
It's and then it's even worse. And everybody who makes content is going to understand me when I say this. TikTok is the most dangerous place in the world, right? So I get on to try to get ideas of what I'm going to do for content. And then the next thing I know, it's the next day, and I've wasted an entire day just trying to figure out what I'm going to do. So I had to be very strategic. I literally have to set a timer if I'm going on to just watch TikToks, because if not, I don't eat throughout the day. I'm just gone. I'm not the person you want to ask about how to stay on task. I get distracted always.
I'm hoping that one day somebody has that magic, idea.
Can you let me know?
Yeah, I will. We're 60. This is what I think this will be 62 episodes in, and we still haven't figured it out.
Nobody's won that.
Sadly, one day I'll find somebody, hopefully. But
it's even worse when you're your own boss, right? Because I'm not going to be mean to myself. Are you kidding me? I paid way too much money in therapy to learn how to be nice to myself, to go back to get it together.
Yeah,
No,
where
I'm
I'm
just
like, I'm looking over my shoulder. I gotta make
Yeah.
sure everything.
You wasted an entire day, but your mental health is great. Like
Yeah,
those are conversations I have with myself. I'm the worst boss.
yeah. Well,
I let myself call in all the time.
I probably would be the same way. I mean, oh man. Okay, well, you brought up TikTok, and I was gonna make a stupid dad joke about how I'm not Sean Evans, so I'm not gonna do a deep dive on your Instagram or anything like that. But no, what kind of social media do you use besides just Twitter? Like, what else are you using for fantasy content?
So Twitter's my primary. I love Twitter. I'm obsessed with it. I've recently started branching into TikTok. I was really scared of TikTok for a while because they're mean. Like they just are. Jeez, Louise. But TikTok has actually been really fun just because it's it's more creative, right? So
Right.
I found that Twitter is more of just like stats and facts and stuff, but with TikTok you can be a little bit more creative, so I like that side of it. But those are really the only two platforms that I'm throwing out content on. I think I have a few things up on YouTube, but it's not consistent.
Gotcha.
Instagram is more of like personal. I hardly ever post on there, and if I do, it's like what music I'm listening to or like the highlights of my life. Like basically it's a place for me to put cute pictures of myself. I don't post much fantasy on there.
Yeah, I've got an Instagram that I use to look at other people's Instagram. I don't know. Yeah. I just have it. No. It's just there just in case. I
have one of those too, and it's called a Finsta, so that people can't tell if I've been stalking them.
See, you guys, y'all got to like,
but
yeah.
Yeah, you're like, please don't tell me that. I will say though, it's a little bit different for me because I do social media for my company that I work for, and so when I talk about like sports or like fantasy output, I do that through Instagram too. It's just exhausting to do your own, to like follow up with your own personal stuff.
Yeah.
Once you've been doing somebody else's stuff all day long. You know what I mean?
I feel you. No, I totally get that. I couldn't even do it for a little bit, let alone like all day. So yeah.
You say that. I bet you would be great though.
Who knows? I stay with jobs for like for like 10s, 11s, 12s.
Oh, you're loyal. That's
loyal.
Amazing. I love that.
That's me. Loyalty.
Great Drake song. You sounded just like him too.
Did I? Oh my gosh.
You really did.
Maybe he's here and
I mean, lucky him.
He's next. He gets to be the next. I'm gonna ask him about his fantasy teams, but
he probably pays somebody to do them for him. It's more of a fantasy basketball guy, I bet.
His ghostwriter for his. He's got his ghostwriter for his fantasy teams. He's like, yeah, totally drafted that team.
He's got it for everything else.
They're buttocks. If you had an extra hour in your day, I know it's crazy, 25 hours instead of 24. Would you use that extra hour? Do you think you'd use it more for work or more for having fun?
Oh, I want to say work, but I'm going to be honest with you. It'd probably be to have fun. Probably I would be eating or relaxing. Honestly, maybe I would take a nap. I love a good nap.
Where my brain went.
Yes. And it's just like, I'm so jealous of those people that are like, I'm going to take a quick 15-minute nap. No, if I lay down, it's a slumber. I'm down for like 3 hours. Half my afternoon's gone. I wake up and I have to eat, and usually I've eaten right before then. So if I had an extra hour, it would probably be to grab some sleep, which is super not motivational. And everybody else is like, okay.
Yeah, but you get that extra hour of sleep. You get that, unless you go to I'm going to sleep and I'm just going to take an hour off. Like, I'm just going to take this nap and that'll cut in, and this, that. And then you play yourself because, you're still going to bed late at night.
Which happens to me a lot.
I do it too. I'm like, just, if I go to bed in 1 more hour, then.
Are you a night person or a morning person? I love this question.
That's a gret question. I wish I would say that I wish I knew the answer to that is what I was going to say. Not that I wish that was a good question. No,
I wish you had better questions.
Wish that was this is my show. Why are you asking me the questions? No, I think that I am more of a morning person now. As I get older.
Good for you.
Yeah. In my 20s, I was definitely a night person. That morning was like, I was the person that was like, this was my last job, so I can say this, but I was the person who was like calling in the morning, and they were like, you only have to be there for an hour in the morning. Why can't you go in for an hour? And I'm like, I just don't feel well.
Traffic. It's traffic.
They're like, nobody feels well in the morning when they're going to work. Now, kids, that is not true. Do not let your employer tell you that.
False information. That's toxic positivity.
Yeah. So you're using your extra hour to at least get some sleep in, and that means you're a little bit more refreshed.
I have more pep in my step.
There you go.
And it's less self-care time that I have to take during the day. I don't know. I say that I would like to say work, but probably I would be doing something for myself. I've made it really important to make sure that I call it my mental health moments throughout the day, where I'm stopping and just doing something for me so that I can stay on task. It's helped my anxiety tenfold. I'm a much happier person. So it would probably be a nap or to do something for myself, which sounds really conceited. But by saying doing something for myself, a lot of times it's like taking my dog to the dog park, or just basically I put my cell phone away and I'm just myself without any extra like high alert system. So like no TV, I'm not engaged in anything other than just like being alive. And that's been really helpful.
You're going to be like Jared Leto when he was out in the middle of nowhere when COVID first started, and he had no clue because he had no news. So
no news. And that's okay. Like I'm such an introvert that I really thrive on my own. Like COVID, I was thriving. Your girl's glowing. Everybody else was like going crazy and about ready to kill the people they were living with. And I was like, I never have to see anybody ever again. And I'm totally fine with that.
I needed a little bit of a different balance there than being at home 24/7. Like I needed I loved working from home. That part was fine. It was just like not being able to do anything once I was done with the work, staying here. And then my wife worked later. And so and she could go into work later. And it was like, it was, I don't know. It was just
she kind of got the best of both worlds then.
Yeah.
I sneaky feel like some people aren't even like that extroverted or didn't need that much human interaction. They just didn't like being told that they had to stay home. They just didn't like the authority of it.
Yeah, a lot of people were, and at first I thought, okay, cool. When they told us to stay home, I was cool with it. But by the end, I was like, man, and then
get me out of here.
And I had started therapy like right afterwards because of all of that. Like I was just like, okay, I'm at my point where I'm just like, I hate being trapped at home by myself. Like I was just getting like lonely and like it was just stupid. So
but good for you for trying to like figure it out, because I love therapy. Anybody who will listen to me, I'm like, please go find a therapist, because well, it's hard at first, right? Because you have to find the right one. But once you find somebody, it's amazing. It's like one of my favorite parts of my life now is therapy. You literally get to talk about whatever you want to talk about, and they're just there to listen and to help you. And then that's it. It's amazing. And you just feel so much better.
That's exactly. You feel so much better when it's like, I'm one of those people still that I get like anxiety prior to going into my session with my therapist, just because like I'm like all day I'm thinking kind of like, I don't really want to go. I don't need to go. I'd rather be at home. I'd rather do this. I'd rather do that. And then I get in there and it's fine. And that's kind of like how it is with like podcasting too. I'm thinking about it all day and I'm like, I'm like,
that's how I am with working out. So I get it.
I like want to do it, but like, I'm like, I have to actually like do it.
Make yourself.
But like at the same time with podcasting, like I enjoy talking to people. I was just, the anxiety thing that you were talking about earlier about having anxiety, like how is going, especially when you first started, how was going on to a podcast being someone who has anxiety?
I think that at the beginning it was really easy for me because, like I said, Robbie was the one who invited me onto a lot of the podcasts in the beginning, and it was kind of with the same set of people. So it was different podcasts, but it was all within the same group. And so I kind of felt comfortable. And I think that that was the best thing that could have happened, because that kind of set a foundation for me and gave me a comfort level and a confidence in myself. And so I think from there, it was just kind of like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, right? When you go on and you don't really know anybody, but I had that foundation to kind of fall back on, which helped me a lot. I will say I did deal with a stalker situation at the beginning of last year. Yeah, it was towards the end of the year, beginning of this year. And it was really hard for me to go on podcasts. I would get really anxious after that because like especially live shows, I started saying no to people because you knew that I was live.
Yeah.
Where I was at, I was kind of stuck there. So I will say I kind of had anxiety with that, but that's something that I worked through with my therapist. And like I said, I try to make sure that my mind is as calm as it can be going into those situations. So for me, that means that I take about 30 minutes a day where I'm not, my phone's either on do not disturb or I leave my phone at home and I just go do me and just kind of regroup. And that's helped me a lot with anxiety throughout life. And then it kind of just spilled over into the podcasting thing too.
I mean, that's great to take time for yourself. Like not enough people do that, is, you know.
No, and you don't think about it, right? That's exactly what we were told not to do when we were younger, right? Like when we were raised, it's all about what can you do for somebody else? Work hard for somebody else. And nobody really stopped to say like, how am I? Like, where's my head at? But for me, it's something that I don't, what happens is I go, and then I completely shut down. And then I'm no service to anybody for days to where, you know, I struggled with that to where like, I want to get out of bed just because I would reach to the point where I couldn't do anymore. And so I just learned I'm actually better in the world whenever I just take a little bit of time for myself. And, you know, you just don't get excessive with it. You know, you just have your set time, you do you and go on. So that's what's helped me a lot with podcasting anxiety, with really everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like when you spread yourself too thin or you say yes too many times to going on people's podcasts and stuff, that's another way to burn yourself out. So finding that nice balance.
Well, when it starts to feel like a job, that's where it gets rough, right? Because this is what we all love to do. We love football. We love talking about football. We love talking about fantasy football. And then we want to connect with people who are the same. But when you're constantly on and you haven't eaten that day, or you're going straight from your job hauling rear to be able to make it to that podcast, and then you're doing that 3 days in a row, yeah, everybody's going to get burned out. It's not going to be as fun because you're stressed. So that's 100% a thing. And I did that to myself at the beginning because I was just so excited.
Yeah, right.
And I get it. Yeah, I also feel like as women in this industry, I think that we don't get a ton of or it's getting better, but we don't get as many opportunities as our male counterparts. And so you almost feel obligated to say yes to every opportunity because you don't want people to think that you're not grateful to be thought of or to be asked. And so I think that I struggled with that a lot at the beginning too. But luckily I had some really great people in my life that kind of assured me that that's not how it has to be.
And it's not how it has to be. And speaking of being a woman in the space, like when I first started playing fantasy football and I got involved on Twitter in the whole space when it comes to fantasy football, and seeing that there weren't that many women in the space and how it's grown and grown. And then you brought up the expo earlier, and we were able to have a panel of women who are in the fantasy football space that put out content. When you were asked to be a part of that and you were able to go and do that, what was that experience like? And how did you feel being a part of something like that?
Well, first of all, I was honored because of everybody who was on that panel. I mean, each and every one of you guys, everybody's doing their own thing and it's amazing. And I've learned from each of you. So to me, it was almost like a fangirl moment where I got to kind of sit up there. It was surreal. But to look out and see, not only was the room completely full, but then there were people fighting in the hallway trying to listen in. That was like, okay, this is what people are wanting, right? And it was just so cool to me to know that my little sister is going to get to grow up in a world where that's going to be the normal. I just kind of felt like excited. And I will say, out of everything, I just felt motivated. I was ready to go to work and to start trying to cultivate a different mindset around women in fantasy football or women in sports in general. So I would just say, like, it was just surreal, honestly.
And for all the women and the little girls up there who want to be a part of the fantasy space, they want to either put out content or they want to just get involved by playing fantasy football, or both, you know?
Or both, yeah.
But they're kind of hesitant about it because they think it's just a man's world and they don't want to just, be cast aside or whatever. What kind of advice or what kind of motivation do you have for those people who are kind of concerned or hesitant?
I think just do it. I think we, as a society, we just overthink too much all the time. Just go join a league, and if there's not one to join, start your own. Get some of your girlfriends and start there and just say, hey, this is fun. It's going to make watching football with whoever you watch football with a lot more fun. And then the way I got my friends involved is we made like silly little bets. So the loser each week had to buy somebody else coffee. And so the girls who weren't even super interested in the league that I started around here, that was one way we kind of got people interested. But then you realize how fun it is once you get going. So you may get to introduce your friends to something that they didn't even know that they wanted, It's just, it's a great way to kind of have your own little community. So I think the best advice is just to get out there and do it. And you don't have to know anything about fantasy football to get started. You really don't. You can go in, fly blind. You may not win all the time, but you'll learn as you go. It's not something that you have to study before you go play.
Yeah. Believe me, I'm still trying to figure things out. It's not,
everybody is.
Yeah,
we overthink.
We're all trying. So yeah, and that's another thing too. So when you put out content, I'm sure that you've gotten the haters that come, that either they don't like your take on something, or even the ones like
that don't like that I'm a female.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that, and I know it happens. And I know we talk about it all the time. It's not one of my favorite things to ask just because we talk about it all the time, but at the same time, like, it's good to get your perspective on how that situation is and how you handle it, because we
have to talk about it. And then sometimes the tools that others use to cope can help you in whatever situation you're in. So I'm all for talking about it. To be honest with you, when people are hateful to me online, it kind of, I have this kind of superpower where it doesn't affect me as much, but I'm also like, I was a teenage girl in high school. Like these middle-aged men that are trying to come at me have no idea. I'm like, you weren't half as mean as what those bullies in high school were like. So I feel like I'm almost like conditioned a little bit. But no, I think that for me, it's just kind of like, I don't really care. I think that where I think my biggest tool is just knowing that I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. There's a ton of other creators. There's a ton of other people doing content that will be a better fit for them. So for me, I'm just kind of like, okay, if you don't like me, like, it's no sweat, because I have my own people, and that's who I'm trying to attract. Going back to being authentic, I feel like the more you are you're going to attract people who like you and who like what you're doing. And you don't have to really worry about the haters, because they're going to move on and go find somebody else. Also, there's a block button for a reason,
One of the greatest inventions ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
I deal with more people just being like gross.
Yeah.
Like I don't need you to comment on my looks when I'm talking about football. I really don't. Or whether it's good or bad. I think that that's where it gets a little tricky for me. But as far as the meanies, I don't really care. Okay. You kind of just got to shake off the haters.
Okay, yes, shake the haters off. That's great advice. And, when somebody comes for like low-hanging fruit and they want to like come at you because you're a woman, or come at you because you're pretty, or come at you because of this or that, and like tell you things that you already freaking know, right? To be able to deal with that kind of stuff, because it is hard to deal with that. It just is. And
it is. Absolutely.
And sometimes you can't just brush it off. Sometimes it does eat away at you, or it does get to you. And those are the, and that, like you said, taking some time to yourself, I think, helps.
Yeah. I think
situations like that.
I keep going back to that, but I think that because I try to keep, kind of like, I make sure that I'm investing in myself every day to kind of have that calm mindset. And because of that, I'm in a better space to handle that. Now, if I'm having like a crazy day and everything's going wrong, and then I get a hateful comment, that's going to set me back a little bit.
Yeah.
But like I said, like, I'm a big advocate for therapy, and I've gotten a lot of cool tools through there. I journal a lot. And so one of the things that I do, if something gets under my skin, I'll ask myself, like, is this true about me? Like, you don't know anything about football? Like,
Yeah.
That's not an exact one, but just that's something that people say. So I would write it out and just say like, is this true? And then you can kind of like, once you face that back at yourself and you propose it as a question, it's easier to work through and just be like, no, like I probably know more than you do. It's not a big deal. And then that's when it's easier for me to shake it off, is that you just kind of have to like set it aside and just deal with it instead of just trying to internalize it or worry about what they're worried about.
But like you said, the women in fantasy panel was standing room only out, spilled out into the hall. Pretty rad. And it was nice to have that many people. And there were so many men in there to have that kind of
support.
Exactly. So that was cool to see as well. Right? Exactly.
100%.
And we should have got more time, and we should have got a bigger room. We've already discussed this. Bob Long knows, so
he's making proper modifications.
But so obviously the positivity is there, and obviously we've been talking about this space and just a community in general, and the expo totally proves that like this community is something like wild and awesome, and amazing. And
we care about each other.
Exactly. Did you know anybody prior to being there? Had you met anybody in person prior to going to the expo?
I did not meet anybody. I felt like I knew Sam Holt because we had done a podcast together. But no, I hadn't met anybody in person. That was my first experience. So I met Sam first because we were rooming together, and then we went. But I felt like I knew people, right? Because I had been following them for a year, social media, but it really was nice to kind of just like be surrounded in that element. But no, I didn't know. I officially in person hadn't met anybody before I went.
So you basically answered my question about meeting people for the first time and how that went.
I can't even explain that. I get so giddy when I talk about the expo just because it's so cool to just feel accepted. Like the entire weekend, it was almost like summer camp, right? But I was getting to hang out with all of these people that I had been wanting to hang out with and who I had called friends, but who I hadn't met in person. So it was awesome. And just being able to see people's energy and just, I don't know, it was just fun. If you haven't gone to the expo, if you're listening, you have to go. Like you just have to make it a priority.
Right.
It's an amazing experience. But no, it was amazing. That's all I can say. Amazing. It's my adjective.
It's amazing. Well, it is amazing. And I don't know if my friends are like, well, why are you going to Canton every August? Well,
why are you not?
Why are you not? It's the best. But it was so much fun. Did you have an experience or something that happened there that like sticks out in your mind?
I bawled my eyes out when I went to the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah,
I wasn't the only one. Kendall and Sam both cried too. But no, walking in and seeing the busts. When I saw John Madden, that was a lot. But I just kind of felt so overwhelmed with the weekend whenever I had gone in there, and it was just such a cool moment for me. But I just felt like I made so many connections, and I left with so many friends that I feel like are true friends now. If I showed up in their state and I was like, hey, let's go grab lunch, I truly think that so many of them would. But I think just the entire weekend was a cool experience. That visiting the Hall of Fame, though, it probably stands out most in my mind.
I still haven't done it, and I've gone to the expo twice. I know. Okay, but to be fair, this time around, my dad showed up when we were supposed to be going,
which was so sweet, though.
But it was just like out of nowhere, so it kind of like bumped everything, and that was the thing that got bumped. So,
well, you have next year.
We do, and we're going to, and we're going to make sure, So, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll have the same kind of experience. I don't know, but.
I didn't think that I would be that person. I'm usually not that like emotional about things like that, but it all kind of hit me. Yeah.
Right.
It's just so cool to just be, I don't know, just kind of just thrown into all of that history and the love of the game. And I also think that it matters who you go with. I was with really great people who were there to experience it all too.
Yeah, that is cool.
Like, nobody's like rushing you through it or anything like that.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, I got you on that. We went.
You know what I'm talking about.
But yeah, that might also be why we didn't go this
Yeah. True reason.
We went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so I mean,
Oh, how was
whatever.
that? Is
It
that
was
cool?
okay. It was pretty cool, you know.
Not as
I
cool as the Hall of
voted,
Fame?
and then now I get email every day for.
Oh,
Yeah, I need
yeah,
to
you
get
had
off.
to spam
I'm one of
that.
those lazy people that like I just created a new
Unsubscribe.
email address because that one's basically spam now. I have an SBC global email address from when I was like
Way back.
way back in the, like my first house ever that I, you know, it was just like
I have a friend who makes a ton of money, and all she does is clean up people's emails. Like, she literally
wow.
goes through and unsubscribes from things. She makes a ton of money doing it, but that's all she does. Doesn't that sound awful? I'm like, that is
that's
like
why mine is
capital
so
punishment, I
yeah.
feel like, for me. Just like, I'd rather the latter.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't care if you like. I get like some people like clicking and doing. Not me. I'm not about. Yep, that's why mine looks the way it looks. Like I can't.
Too much admin.
Yes.
I feel you.
Bad. So okay, so the expo was obviously awesome, and as you said, amazing. And you did you
multiple
get to meet,
times?
Did you get to meet any people there that you either didn't know existed in the first place, and it was like, wow, cool, like, or did you meet somebody that like you knew about but like had never really like face to face or like talking on the internets and stuff?
Not really. I feel like everybody I was familiar with, just because, like you said, like Twitter is so big in our community, and I knew people from Twitter, so I wasn't I would say like shocked to meet anybody. I was disappointed there was a few people who I wanted to meet that didn't get to make it.
Yeah.
But no, everybody I feel like I kind of knew of. I will say, just a suggestion, cough, cough, Bob Lung. I think that our Twitter handles should be on our name tags next year, because I would like meet people and I'd be like, and they'd be like, oh, I'm so-and-so. And I'm like,
okay, thank you.
That
would have helped me, especially for the people that, whose faces aren't their profile picture.
Right.
I missed out on people,
but
and I
also
felt like a total,
and
they're tiny, and I felt like a total jerk. Or like, and also like, both sides would be cool to have it on too, so that when it flips over, because they flip a lot, and so you were like, oh, I know you introduce yourself. Who are you?
Yeah. Well, and when you're a couple drinks in, also, it's like it gets a little more difficult. But if we could have our Twitter handles on the name tags next year, it would be amazing.
Primo. See, look at that. All the little.
You're welcome.
There you go. I like it. Idea of the hour right there. You heard it first. When it happens, we have to credit you.
Hey, I will take the credit as long as it's done. Yeah. And it needs to be double-sided for Kacey.
It needs to be double-sided for me. Yeah. Yes. But
I go one time, and now I have all of these demands.
You have all of the answers. Well, I mean, I will say, you know, I didn't have anything underneath it. People were like, you don't have any. I just had my name, right? I didn't have like a site. I didn't put my podcast name. I don't know. I don't know. I would tell you some of the stuff people said, but it's inappropriate. Anyway,
shake off the haters.
Shake off the haters. Back to you know, positivity and positive people. Networking is like a big game changer in Twitter is a big game changer when it comes to networking. But how do you go about like talking to somebody, especially somebody that maybe you have never talked to before, or maybe like somebody?
Kacey, I'm so awkward. Yeah. I usually say something like off the wall, and then makes them feel a little bit awkward, and it's just easier to roll out when you're both starting from like what just happened.
Yeah.
No,
I like that.
I will say that when we were at the fantasy stuff, it was really nice because I was, like I said, rooming with Sam Holt. Sam knows everybody, and so I was just kind of like the tag along, and then she would introduce me, and it was just kind of easy. But I always fall back to common ground, like. Okay, especially when we're networking in this industry, we all like football. We all like fantasy football.
Yep.
Who's your sleeper this year? Like, I would just fall back to easy questions that I knew everybody had an answer for. And then it just, once you can start talking about something that you're comfortable and confident in, you gain more confidence. It's just kind of takes the anxiousness or the anxiety out of the situation, or like awkwardness, because talking to strangers is awkward. People, unless you're like a crazy extrovert, and I feel like they're lying if they say they never get nervous talking to a new person, right? It's just awkward at first, just because It just is. So I think just throwing out something that you know is common ground is the best place to start, and then working your way up from there. But that's what I do.
Are you a part of the Scott Fishbowl, or have you been a part of it?
This is my first year.
Okay.
It's going terribly. In case anybody wants to know, I had Tua as one of my quarterbacks.
Aww.
Rough time, yeah. So I somehow missed like the group chat thing, and they went from doing like a slow 8-hour draft to like the 30-minute draft, and so I auto picked like 7 times in a row and had no idea. So that's kind of a bummer, but it's okay because we're gonna win on waivers. So I can tell myself, yes.
Hey, I like that. Like, do it.
I mean, you got to make the best out of a situation, right?
You really do. And yeah, exactly. Like, if it wasn't, like you said, injury, you know,
that happens all the time.
Everything happens all the time. So just you're going to win it with a little bit of a handicap. It's cool.
And that's totally fine. Last year, I lost like half of my running backs before season even started. So anything's better than that.
That's always a blast.
It was awful. I was like, are you kidding me?
Have you ever like been in a draft and drafted a player, and then like news comes out like either during the draft or like right after that they're hurt or whatever?
Yeah, that happened. It was literally one of my running backs. I think it was, I don't remember who it was. It was maybe Dobbins. I don't know.
I always forget,
but it was
because I know mine was Dobbins.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty sure it was Dobbins, but it was the next day, and I was like, or maybe it's a couple days later, but anyways, it's not a good time. No, that's awful.
Then it is. It's horrible. Or like my friend who drafted Andrew Luck and then he retired. Oh, you know, like kind of stuff.
And see, like I feel like they should get some sort of like, I feel like if it's something like that, or if it's a huge player, I think that you should get some sort of credit. I don't know.
You think that until you're like,
it doesn't happen that way.
I want to win. Everybody wants to win. So
I want to win.
I want to win. So speaking of leagues, you had brought up earlier that you're in a league, that you're still in a league with some of the same people that
from high school.
So you guys, how do you do your drafts?
So now it's all virtual. Just because we used to try to get together. Now so many people have moved. Some people live out of the country even. Yeah. And so it's kind of just like, it's like we set a time, everybody gets on, and that's it. Like we just draft. The group chat is where it's at. It's just all trash talking. That's what makes it fun.
I need to get in. You know what? I'm going to start a group chat for my home league, because like we were talking about doing it and then we never did. And the reason we were talking about doing it was to shame the people who won't set their lineups, because it takes 2 seconds and they know it takes 2 seconds.
And they never do.
And I really hope they listen to this podcast, and I know they don't, but I like bring it up every episode.
Call them out. Name names.
Lauren. Lauren Renner. Okay. I love you, Lauren. Anyway. Oh, no. But it's really cool that you guys from high school, and then that happens with a lot of people that come on here. So they're like, oh yeah, a lot of the same people. So is the league all women, or do you have women and men in that league?
I'm the only woman.
Oh,
I know.
I like it.
I kind of like it like that too.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've kept no new friends. It's kind of what we've adapted, but it's just like the same.
Well, we got all these Drake. Okay, keep going.
Drake, you've got to come on now. It's just like we have our core group, and that's what's been cool. Is it's just like the nostalgia factor, and so that's, I think, what's also kept us together. Is it's not even just the pressure of being in a league, but it's like if you drop out, like you're giving up all of this history and you can't come back.
You don't want to do
that. I think that type of just making sure that we stay close knit, like nobody's dropped off, nobody's been added in. This fact that everybody keeps showing up, I think that it's one, we want to, but then on the other hand, like you don't want to be the person who ruins it, who drops out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But there's a guy who's lost 4 years in a row, and like I think he's thought about it, but we're like, nah, like you're stuck. You've committed yourself for life. Just do better. Be better. No, I'm just joking.
What's your favorite when it comes to leagues and everything? What's your favorite setting or you know, anything? Wrinkle, some crazy thing? Anything.
Okay, so now my new favorite thing is all 22, how you can draft. And you can draft your entire team. So you have a 53-man roster, right? You're picking your offensive linemen, you're picking your defensive schemes. It's not just, it's more of like Madden meets fantasy football. That's what I'm super into right now, just because it's the whole football side of, I'm obsessed with the offensive line. If you follow me, you already know, right? So I really like that we're finally giving guys credit and grading them, and it's not as a unit.
Yeah, not as a unit is a big, big deal.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah, and I know that it's like kind of, I know IDP is big with a lot of people for that reason as well, because it's like, oh, hello,
100%, yeah. But you also learn more about the game when you do it that way,
right?
It's more difficult, but it's more rewarding.
When you were growing up and you're in Oklahoma and obviously Sooners and everything, but when it came to NFL, what were you doing?
Okay, so people are going to judge me for this. I didn't really get into the NFL. Like I said, I grew up Cowboys fan when I was younger, and then they went kaput. And then I was just kind of focused on like college football, I would say. Yeah. Honestly, it was really just kind of like OU football.
Yeah.
But then what happened was a few of the guys that I was living with and all the guys that I made friends with started making it in the league. So of course I wanted to follow them. And that's when I got really invested, because at that point I was a little more developed in like breaking down film and things like that. I could appreciate it more. I think when people when they say they don't like the NFL or it's not as fun as NCAA, I think it's because they don't watch it from like the NFL is so intricate. It's so wild to me. When you actually slow things down and you watch what they're doing, it's like ballet. It's so many small things have to happen for the big thing to happen. But if you're just focused on the big thing, it's not going to seem as cool to you, right? So whenever I really started focusing on breaking down plays and just the intricacy of it, I started to respect it more. And that's when I became a big NFL fan. So that was only like, I don't know, like probably 4 or 5 years ago that I really started to get into it.
That's cool though. I like that origin story. Maybe OU should be the team that I try to get into, since Allen's like right down the street, and I feel like a bunch of like quarterbacks.
Every quarterback. I feel like there's so many people that want to go to out of state schools from Texas that they end up at OU.
They do, yeah. So
and then what happens is everybody graduates from OU and goes to Dallas. It's just a constant feeding ground for both.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we go, I'm very excited to have been able to talk to you. It's amazing.
It's so much fun. Yes. It was so much fun. Amazing. Look, you've adapted.
I have. I'm getting with the program, and super, super, super excited that I was able to talk with you, especially since like we were talking about the expo, but we got to be on the panel together, and I got to meet you, and it was really, really a cool experience. So cool. So yeah, to be able to have you come on here next year, you can raise your hand when I ask. I was like, oh my God, what a total tool to say, if you've been on my podcast, raise your hand. But I just wanted to say, like, look, I talk to people that can help you with your, getting into the industry, and tips and tricks are always nice. And you've given us a lot. And I just want to know, before we go, if you could tell everybody what you're doing right now, what you have going on, because I know you're like all over the place. What do you do? Like, tell me your like normal 25-hour day.
Yes, lots of naps. No,
what do you got going on? And then where people can find you and everything else.
So I make it super easy for people to find me. Apparently, nobody has my name in the world, but Madi Kroll, MadiKroll on everything. Literally, if there's social media platform and you type in that name, it's me. So you can find me on there. You're right, I do have a lot going on. So I just partnered with Amazon, so I have an Amazon storefront that I link everywhere. I work for Heavy Sports, so I now have a few podcasts that are coming out through that, do social media through them, and then I help cover the NBA, so I do some reporting on that. And yeah, I'm just kind of all places all the time, do a lot of stuff in the nonprofit world, which I'm kind of building on and trying to integrate into sports stuff as well. But you can keep up with all of that when you follow me on those platforms, because it changes like day to day.
Yeah, definitely go follow all of her stuff. Like, You can find all of her content, all the fun stuff. It's all there. So if you're not following Madi already, you need to be following her. Also,
Thank you.
I asked, you're welcome. Well, I asked Dave this. I like to ask people who have names that often get misspelled, because I'm one of those people. Do you get your name misspelled quite often? Or
all the time?
Yeah.
All the time. Madi gets changed all the time. It doesn't really bother me too much, except for when people message me and it's like a completely different name, and I get Mandy a lot, and I'm like, okay, like if you're gonna ask me to do something for you, you need me to retweet something for you, please don't call me Mandy. Like, you literally can see my name in my handle. But yeah, no, that happens sometimes. Luckily, I have kind of an easy name. Like, Madi's 4 letters, and then Kroll's not far behind.
Right on. Well, go make sure you're following Mandy.
Yeah, come follow Mandy. She's
Mandy
cool.
Knoll. Go follow Mandy Knoll. And that's gonna be,
people are gonna be so confused. If you made it to this point, like, I commend you.
If you create the account, like, whatever.
If you made it to the point where you're Googling me, good for you. I'll take it.
You. High five. You Google me, it just says, did you mean Casey Kasem?
Yeah.
So, it's okay. At least you don't have
no keychain name for you.
Not at all. Okay, Madi. Madi Kroll is who you guys need to follow. But yeah, make sure. We went off the rails from the beginning, so it doesn't. Yeah. This ending where I'm supposed to say you should stay rad, for real, guys. If you don't stay rad, then there's some issues. Just make sure you're staying rad. Right, Madi?
That's it. That's all you got to do.
That's all you got to do. Yep. And this is me sober, too. So anyway, thanks, guys. Make sure that you're coming back next week or whenever.
Come back.
Just come back, please. Please don't get scared. We'll be back again soon. All right. Stay rad. Yeah. I love it.